Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria, and I'm going to be your host on today's virtual field trip. Although, it is a little hard to go anywhere when I'm stuck here at my desk.
Oh! There we go. Now I can get around much easier in this digital universe. Well, I'm ready, so let's get to it. Today, we're going to be learning about climate change. I know, it's a term we've probably all heard before, but we might not always understand it completely. So let me start with the basics by asking you this question first. What is the difference between changing climate and changing weather? I mean, they both involve the same things: sun, rain, snow, etc. So what's the difference? Well, weather is what we measure daily. It might be hot today, cold tomorrow, and rainy the next. Climate, on the other hand, is a much longer-term measurement. We don't look at climate in terms of days, but rather years, decades, even centuries. Here, I'll give you an example. If we looked at the average summer temperatures in Philadelphia between this year and last year, you might say, that's just 1 degree warmer. That's not so bad. It may even be a little cooler next year. And you'd be right. These average temperatures may rise and fall a little bit from year to year, but if we look way back, you'll start to notice a trend. We can see that on average, Philadelphia was about 2 degrees cooler 100 years ago than it is today. But this isn't just limited to Philadelphia. It's true for everywhere. You might have heard the term global warming before, too. That's because the climate is changing in one very specific way. It's getting warmer. So, what happens if we change our climate? Well, that small difference has already caused more extreme weather, natural disasters, chronic droughts, and poor air quality. But there's one other thing that's been changing over the years besides just our climate. It's where people live. Over the years, more and more people have been moving to cities. In fact, cities have been growing so fast that already more than half of our planet's population are living in cities. And that number is expected to grow. And while more people move to cities, the Earth's climate will continue to rise even hotter than it is now. And that means more extreme weather, droughts, natural disasters. You get the idea. Affecting people in cities all around the world. But it's not all bad news. Today, we're going to look at how we can adapt or learn to better live with this changing climate and even slow it down by incorporating more nature into our lives. That's right. Trees, flowers, grasses, plants are coming to the rescue. Today on Nature Lab. So, why is the world getting warmer? Well, a lot of it has to do with gases in our atmosphere. Certain gases in Earth's atmosphere block heat from escaping. That's called the greenhouse effect. These gases keep Earth warm in the same way that a greenhouse keeps plants warm. The energy from the sun can pass through, but it can't get out. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that works to trap heat close to the Earth. It helps Earth hold the energy it receives from the sun so it doesn't all escape back out into space. In this case, carbon dioxide is a good thing. If it weren't for carbon dioxide, it would be freezing on Earth. There are a lot of natural ways that carbon dioxide is released into the air, like when we breathe. But human activities, like burning fuel to power our factories, cars, and buses, are changing this natural greenhouse. These changes cause the atmosphere to trap even more heat than it used to, leading to a warmer Earth. What we want to try to find out today is if there's a way we can mitigate the effects of climate change. When we mitigate something, it means we lessen its severity. But how? Perhaps we can find a way to somehow capture these greenhouse gases and reduce the changes to our climate. Well, guess what? Plants, of all things, can do that. They can clean the air, making it easier for us to breathe. They can capture and store carbon. That's amazing! So, I guess all we need to do now is maybe protect our forests, grasslands, and wetlands. Perfect. But what about in cities? That seems a little harder to do. I mean, we can't just go around tearing down buildings to make way for nature. People live and work in these places. Maybe there's a balance we can strike and green our cities. Don't worry, when I say green our cities, I'm not talking about painting everything green. No. What I'm talking about is planting trees. Get it? They're green! They have leaves? Yeah? Ugh, never mind. Long ago, before we started to put up buildings and roads, our entire planet was natural or green, full of trees, plants, and open natural spaces. As more people started to move in, we put up bigger and taller buildings, roads, sidewalks, and more. Don't get me wrong, I love cities, and the people that live there really need those buildings and roads. Cities can actually make a really positive impact on our climate if we're smart about them. Perhaps there's a way we can still have all of these buildings and roads while also including more nature. Greening our cities is a strategy we can use to help absorb greenhouse gases, mitigate extreme heat, combat flooding, address stormwater pollution, and cool our cities, among other issues. By adding more plants within our cities, we can solve a lot of these challenges. There are actually some great examples of this already. Some neighborhoods and cities already have a lot of trees, plants, and other green spaces. But most of these neighborhoods are in wealthy communities. Most low-income neighborhoods aren't as lucky and are often forgotten. Because of this, these communities don't have access to as many of the benefits that plants provide. Plants have the ability to cool the air. With less access to nature, those underserved communities are often hotter. Imagine living in a neighborhood that was hotter than your friends and breathing in bad air all day, every day. That can make you really sick over time. You might not realize it until it was too late. But everyone should be able to enjoy a cooler planet and cleaner air, not just some. So the question is, how do we fix the problem? Let's jump over to our first city to see how one place is combating a common issue of climate change: rising temperatures. This is made worse by urban heat islands? No, we're not creating islands in the middle of the city. But that does sound lovely right about now. Come with me. I'll explain. Cities are getting hot, and with all of that concrete, it's no wonder. One city that knows heat better than most is Phoenix, Arizona, where the air temperatures in the summer often reach over 110 degrees.
Phoenix is one of the hottest cities in the world. By 2060, the days are going to get hotter.
Here, let's look at a heat map of Phoenix so we can see these temperatures in action. The areas in orange and red are the hottest areas. One thing that you may notice on this map, though, is that some areas are hotter or redder than others. These little pockets of red are our heat islands. And these little islands pop up all over the city. But it isn't really clear why. Look at this one. This neighborhood is 13 degrees hotter than another neighborhood just 2 miles away from it. Why is it like that? Well, let's fly down to the ground and take a look. If we look at side-by-side examples, you can see that the second neighborhood has a lot of plants and trees, but the first neighborhood has almost no trees. This lack of trees actually explains why this place is hotter. Think about it. When it's hot outside, what do? You seek out shade. And if you think about it, trees are a lot like giant umbrellas. Without shade from trees, the area will get hotter. And that's true for virtually all of these hot areas on the map. The places that are the hottest have less trees than the cooler ones.
Heat is something that affects everyone, but we have communities here in Phoenix that are only a couple miles apart, and the temperature difference can be up to 13 degrees. In addition to that, the American Lung Association rated Phoenix the 7th most polluted in the country. So these are some of the really big challenges we have here, and it's affecting our health, our safety, our comfort, and our economy.
But trees don't just make people cooler, they make the earth cooler too. Phoenix, like many other cities, has a lot of concrete in its sidewalks, buildings, and roads. All of those hard surfaces, especially the ones directly in the sun, can trap heat. Let me show you a simple outside experiment that you can try at home too. I have a thermometer, which I've placed directly in the sun. The temperature reads a whopping 90 degrees in the sun. Now, if I move the thermometer just 3 feet to the right, so that it's under this tree here, let's see what happens. Wow, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. So, if we were to cover the concrete in these cities from the shade of trees, then we could make those hot surfaces much cooler. And there's one hot spot in particular that's about to get a green makeover. This dusty open lot is the site for a new re-greening project for this community. This air cannot be good for my lungs. This little 16,000 square foot patch of dirt has remained largely unused for years, and it sits right between the community's vegetable garden and the road. Making this area greener will certainly help the community members to stay cool while they're walking to and from their vegetable garden. But it's not just about planting trees. It's about planting the right trees in the right place and using the right water. The designer for this project selected trees that are adapted to this warm climate, meaning that the trees planted here are used to desert conditions. And in the desert, it can be very hot and very dry. Fortunately, these plants don't require much water at all, and they love heat. So thanks to the designer, we've got a great plan. And the next step is to do it. Who better to put this plan into action than the people that live here?
So what we're doing here today is we're actually putting some different types of plants into the ground from a conservation perspective. And we feel that this conservation beautification effort is exactly the reason why we wanted to be on these vacant lands. Before we started projects like this, these fields were basic and blank and had trash and debris in them. So that's a huge challenge for us because we find more vacant fields in our community as opposed to projects like this that reclimate and conserve and actually bring beautification to that very same vacant lot.
Just imagine doing something like this in your own community. Everyone came together and pitched in to transform this patch of land into a greener space using native plants and trees. native is another way of saying local, or from this part of the world. Not only are the residents giving back to their own community, but they're also learning about the importance of nature by literally getting their hands dirty.
So the importance of engaging local residents is the fact that this speaks to connectedness, it speaks to placement, and it speaks to enfranchisement. That's typically things that we don't see when the local residents aren't involved in something that's being built in their community. They are disconnected from that whole project, whereas this project is actually being built by all of us together.
But what about this air quality? I think a lot of us already know that trees help to produce the oxygen that we breathe. But did you know that they can also help clean our air as well? That's right. And the answer lies in the leaves of our trees. Leaves provide a surface for particles floating around in the air to settle on, just like dust settles out on the furniture in your house. And some leaves can even be hairy or sticky, which helps to grab even more particles. And the plants in our garden can also capture the nearby carbon dioxide by incorporating it into the plant cells as they grow. They pull the carbon dioxide through little holes in the leaves, and then, as the plants get energy from the sun, they fix this carbon into organic molecules, releasing clean oxygen for us to breathe. So those trees are going to be doing double duty for us. Not only will they be helping to cool this area, but they'll also help to clean the air. I had no idea nature could do so much. And a little goes a long way in the desert. The amount of plants and trees used here is just what this area needs to be successful. These young plants may not look like much now, but several years from now, these little seedlings will grow big and tall, providing some much-needed shade and some carbon-sucking power for the residents that live here.
This takes care of so many different types of environmental factors. There's a heat island effect that's being addressed. There's also different types of energy that's being put out by putting these plants here. So from a green perspective, these are the types of projects that you want to see in your community because they cool your community down while providing nutrients and providing all types of oxygen for our air.
Okay, so we just learned that climate change is making our planet warmer, and we just saw one way we can adapt. But are there other side effects of this warming planet? Well, yes, and one you might not expect. Our warming climate has resulted in stronger weather events, like storms. When a storm rolls in and the rain hits the ground, where does all that water go? In a forest or on a prairie, it sinks into the ground and eventually makes its way into our rivers, streams, and oceans. But it's a different story when rain falls in our cities. In cities, the path is much different. When you think of a city, what do you see? Maybe skyscrapers? Sidewalks? Highways? In cities around the world, paved surfaces like these can make even a simple storm much worse because the rainwater can't soak into the ground. Now, it's not the rainwater that's dirty, but it's what's picked up along the way that's a problem. Stormwater carries with it almost anything that's on the ground. That means trash, definitely pollutants. Pollutants are substances introduced into the environment that can have negative effects on our planet, like oil from cars, gasoline, pesticides, and fertilizers. But also, your pet's poop. And if that gets into our water, ugh! This dirty water can be funneled into our rivers and oceans, harming wildlife and ruining our drinking water. And these days, there are lots of people living in cities, which means there are lots of pollutants that our rainwater is picking up. And the more people that move into cities, the more contaminants may enter our waterways. So, is there a solution? I think you know the answer. We know that our cities have a lot of different infrastructure. These are structures and systems that make our cities function, like buildings and roads. But what about natural infrastructure, like rain gardens, green roofs, and trees? These can help absorb excessive rain by slowing down the rainwater and filtering it at the same time. We call this green stormwater infrastructure. Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know. Basically, instead of water flowing over city streets and sidewalks, picking up pollutants along the way, and dumping all of that into our waterways, we can use green infrastructure to intercept and clean this dirty water before it reaches our waterways. Here, let's look at another example. This time, though, we're headed halfway around the world to Shenzhen, China. But first, pop quiz! How many gallons of rainwater do you think fall in Shenzhen every year? Thousands? Millions? Billions? Or trillions? You got it. Over 1 trillion gallons of rainwater fall in Shenzhen every year. Wow, that is a lot of zeros. Now, let's learn what they're doing to keep all that rainwater clean. Shenzhen is one of 30 cities around China that's transforming its city into a giant sponge? Well, not literally a sponge, but the same idea, which I'll explain later. They're making their city greener, and I mean a lot greener. They're adding plants everywhere, on roofs, on sidewalks, in parks, you name it. It's incredible. So, what will all of these plants do? Well, the next time it rains, most of the water that runs off of these buildings will be captured by these plants and slowly be released back into the rivers, streams, and lakes. The longer the water sits in the plant's root system, like a sponge, the better chance the plants have to break down those toxic chemicals. Just how many plants is the city of Shenzhen trying to plant anyway? They have a goal of treating over 90 square miles of surface in the city. That's like an area bigger than Washington, D.C. And that's just in plants! Where does all of this water go anyway? Well, if we look back at our map of Shenzhen, we can see the nearby harbor. All of the rainwater that falls in this city eventually makes its way into the bay. The cleaner we can get that rainwater before it enters the bay, the better it is for our environment. These plants help to clean our water, but they also do something else. They provide habitat for some of our smallest species. Trees provide habitat for birds and squirrels, while smaller plants provide habitat for insects. It's just another example of the many multiple benefits of nature. Wow, that was pretty amazing. And I, for one, feel inspired. It turns out there are a lot of things that cities can do to adapt to the effects of climate change, and nature can play a really important role in helping. But there are a lot of things that you can do as well. One thing you can do is plant more trees. But try to be thoughtful about it. make sure that you plant trees that are adapted to the area that you live. It's all about the right tree in the right place, with the right water, with the right people. And remember, not everyone has access to nature in the same way. People in low-income communities are often the ones in need the most. Local community groups, like my friends at Tiger Mountain Foundation in Phoenix, are a great example of groups you can engage with. And the same goes for stormwater runoff. There may be organizations where you live trying to solve these problems as well. Or, in the case of Shenzhen, your local government. We can all do our part to help mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. And if we all did just one small thing to change it, we could make a big difference. See what you can do in your own backyard and inspire others to join the cause. Well, that's all the time we have for today's virtual field trip.
I hope you all enjoyed this trip around the world as we learned how nature can provide solutions to some of the world's climate problems. Bye for now. I'll see you on the next virtual field trip soon.